Tater tots. Tater tots. What was I saying again? What's up, everybody? I am Sister Slayage, and welcome to my channel, boo sugar. Probably had a little spit spray there. Well, if you saw the thumbnail and you saw the title, you know today I will be reviewing the Morphe 35M palette, the Boss Mood palette. Yes, her right here. So I'm gonna have a quick review with this palette. I'm currently wearing it. The only thing that's on my eye that's not from this palette is the concealer at the top that I use as a highlight, and the glitter that's on my lid. The glitter is by JACLYN Beauty. I think the color is called Royal Robe. If you are interested in a tutorial on how to get this hair look, click up there, boo sugar. So I'm just gonna get straight into it. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I have a technique that I like to use to rate any eyeshadow palettes and determine if they are the right eyeshadow palettes for you. And that system that I use is called LOVE. Yes, love, like heart, one word, L-O-V-E. And I'm gonna dive right into it. First, I am going to start with L, which stands for longevity and the life of the palette. This palette was recently released by Morphe brushes, and when I say recent, probably about 3 months ago, no more than 6 months ago. This palette can be purchased at Ulta and also on morphebrushes.com. It is a part of the 3-5 family, which has a host of other palettes that are the main reason why they call them the 3-5 family is because they have 35 colors. And so when it comes to the particular palette, this is not my first palette that I've owned by Morphe, and I have the same results as far as how the eyeshadow wears. The eyeshadow is long wearing on the lid, and it doesn't crease, it doesn't smudge, it doesn't crumble or cake or anything like that, especially if you use an eyeshadow base. I would advise to not use the Morphe eyeshadow base with this, even though it is released and distributed and manufactured by the same people who made this palette. I've found for better results to either use the MAC 24-hour eye base or a concealer that is cream based that would actually adhere to the eyeshadow in this palette. Now, that's for the long wearing part of the eyeshadow. Now for the longevity of this palette. Being the fact that this palette was purchased about 3 months ago, I've noticed recently that I have not seen this palette on shelves in Ulta. And I'm a little concerned about that because I considered this palette, and there was another one, I believe it was the 35V or 35B, that was released within a week of this palette. And the 35B is still on shelves, but this one is not. And it makes me wonder if this was like the love child of Morphe. It seemed like they were releasing this palette during the down season going into the holiday season, and they released the James Charles palette, and then there were other product launches that came shortly after, so it kind of pushed this palette into the shadows, which makes me wonder about the longevity of this palette and if this palette will be available in the future to be readily purchased. So when it comes to the wear of the eyeshadow, I'm going to give this a 7 because the eyeshadow did not cake, crease, pull, crumble. It didn't do any of those things, and I have it on right now. And when it comes to the life of the palette, being the fact that it is Morphe and they're really good about distributing in large quantities, and they're also really good about constantly restocking their product, I am actually going to give this a 7, which is very uncommon for me because usually I would give a palette a low score if I'm not seeing it on shelves. But for some reason, Morphe tends to be an exception to the rule. I don't feel that they would have any problems with restocking this palette. The next letter in this acronym is O, and O stands for organize. And organization of a palette really refers to how the colors are arranged in the palette. And I have Exhibit A right here. And they've changed their packaging as well within this past year, and I really like it a lot better. It seems a lot durable, but that's besides the point. This palette is indeed extremely organized. And to be quite frank, I am not downing other brands, and I'm not trying to put Morphe up on a pedestal, but I'm not surprised at this at all, which is a good thing. Morphe is really known for being organized with their palettes. Even at times they will have palettes where there's a just one texture versus another. This palette has a mixture of textures where you have mattes, satins, and shimmers. I'm not always a fan of the mixing of textures because a lot of times your shimmers can bleed over into your mattes and it can just really mess up an eye look, especially if you're on the go. But with the 3-5 family, they're really good about organizing the palettes in color tone. So as you can see from this side, you have the lights going into the greens, the browns, the oranges, the purples, and some blue tone reds and your blacks and browns. So the benefit of having a palette that is as organized as this, it's not going to create any anxiety or have you be overwhelmed when you're on the go and trying to get ready for work. You can break this down into the usual quadrants of 4 and you can come up with an eye look very, very easily. So when it comes to the organization of this particular palette, I'm going to give it a straight up 10. And I am a very harsh critic. Usually I find something wrong, but I am going to give this palette a strong 10 and I'm impressed. Now we're going to get to the third part of this acronym, and that's the letter V. Value and versatility. If you watch my initial video on how to pick out the perfect eyeshadow palette, you will get introduced to the love method, and this will help you pick out an eyeshadow palette that is long wearing and has longevity, organized, and also has value and versatility, and I'll get to the E later. So when we look for value and versatility in a palette, value, we're looking at the cost point per eyeshadow within the palette. And what you really want to do, just to make sure eyeshadow palette is usually within a reasonable price range, you want it to be anywhere from 50 cents, well, it could be cheaper, but 50 cents to $3 per eyeshadow palette, per eyeshadow within the palette. If you're going over that unit, usually you're going to be looking at something that's more of an editorial or artist palette, and not so much a palette that is for the average consumer. And if you have a lot of money, if you have $10 to spend per color in an eyeshadow palette, let me borrow some money because it must be nice. But the thing I do like about this palette is with this palette, the value proposition is really good. And this is what you're going to find on average for every Morphe 3.5 or 3.50 palette, because each of those colors have a cost point of anywhere from 50 to 75 cents per eyeshadow within the palette. That's going to bring your total cost anywhere from like $22 to $26 for 35 colors. However, when it comes to the versatility of this particular palette, I'm just going to tell you what I see as a consumer and as an artist. As an artist, I see an editorial palette and I actually see an artist palette. As a consumer, I see colors I would rarely use. With that being said, if you are an eyeshadow enthusiast or a makeup collector or a makeup artist, I would recommend buying this palette. But if you are just the average woman who likes neutrals or who likes maybe 2 or 3 colors, I would recommend to shy away from this palette. Although it is a great palette and it has a great cost proposition, I still don't see a lot of versatility with this palette. Yes, these can be used as some contour colors here, here, and here, but it's going to be a very warm contour, almost to the point to where it's more of a bronzer. And we have a very small amount of colors in here that could be used as highlights, but a lot of them can be used as blushes. So as far as a versatile palette, I don't really see a really versatile palette here, and that's fine. This is one of the type of palettes that you buy when you already have your neutral eyeshadow palette or your smoky eyeshadow palette. This is what I would call a non-primary eyeshadow palette. So if you have no eyeshadow palettes and you're just starting with your makeup game, I would not make this one my first one. I would probably do the 35 Nature Glow or the 35M or the 350 Matte. I believe I'm saying that correctly. I would start off with those because they have more warm tone colors. They're have more colors you can use as highlight, blushes, and some of those colors can actually mix to the point to where if you were in a dire situation and you didn't have your foundation with you, you probably could mix some of those colors to come up with a foundation. So as far as value, I'm going to give this a 9. And the reason why I'm giving it a 9, I always poke holes through things, but I'm giving this a 9 because you have other eyeshadow palettes that you could find, such as Essence, such as Model Zone, where you can even find something that is even cheaper than that. And you could also find 350 dupe palettes for less than 50 cents per unit in the eyeshadow palette. So this is still pretty good as far as the value proposition. As a matter of fact, it's great. Versatility, on the other hand, I'm gonna have to go really low on this one, guys. I'm gonna have to give it a 3. I don't really see where you can do a lot with this palette other than just your eyes and maybe a few blushes. And again, this is a palette that if I were a consumer, this would not be my first Morphe palette. This will probably be somewhere around my 3rd or 4th. Now for the final part of this acronym, the letter E. Ease of everyday use. And ease of everyday use, the letter E, is a very broad category. In this category, I go into the pigmentation, how the product blends, and also if the eyeshadow palette is easy to use, in a sense that if you feel that it's not going to blend well, more than likely you're not going to pull for it. So I have a few swatches on my arm, and these are, I'm going to step aside here. These are some of the swatches from this eyeshadow palette. And when I swatched this palette on my arm, I do have it on my eyes, but it took a lot to build up on my eyes, as you will see on the video. As I see these swatches, I can understand why Morphe treated this palette as a love child, as they released it and went on to something else. This is the part of my job that I hate the most as a beauty blogger. I love Morphe brushes, but I'm gonna be honest with this one. I believe that this was a palette that was probably pressed the wrong way. Kind of like the JACLYN Hill situation, I guess. I don't know. But this palette, in my opinion, was definitely pressed the wrong way. And I am very lenient when it comes to swatches, because just because something swatches good on the arm doesn't mean it's going to do well on the eye, and vice versa. However, I ran into the same problem doing them both. These swatches, these are not a one swatch deal here. I had to go in twice to build this color up. And I am an African American woman, so my skin is a little darker. But as far as my skin tone, I'm probably like a medium dark. I still have very light color arms and yellow undertones, I guess it's safe to say. So usually I can get fair pigmentation just with one swipe. But as you would notice, the greens and the golds in this palette really didn't perform too well. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you the palette again. I would say I started to see better swatching and opacity once I got past this second row. Down here, these colors, they perform pretty well to the point to where I didn't have to swatch 2-3 times just to get opacity. But this first row, they swatched chalky. And even though it didn't crumble on the eye or anything, it's wearing pretty good. But the reason why this palette probably performs so bad is because when someone is in a store such as Ulta and they're swatching it on their hand and their arm, and they're finding that the product is chalky and it's kind of crumbling up, and all the greens up here, even though they're not the same color green, they start to look like the same color green upon swatching and reviewing. It is a huge deterrent for buying this palette, because the average person is going to think, you know what, I love this palette, it's pretty, it draws my attention, but I am going to have hell trying to get ready, because I'm going to be spending 10 minutes just building eyeshadow up on my eye, and I don't necessarily have time for that. So when it comes to the pigmentation, I'm going to have to give it a 4. I'm going to have to give it a 4. And when it comes to the way the product blends, as you will see on my makeup tutorial, which is the New Year's Red makeup tutorial. I'm sorry. I had to constantly build this product up, and I had to be very light with blending. And I understand that most Morphe colors are pigments. Pigments are nice, but they're usually softer and they're harder to blend. And I found that I did better with using a natural hairbrush, because the products were a little drier, I guess that's the best way to put it, than usual pigments from Morphe. So this palette is a little on the weird side. So for ease of everyday use, I'm gonna give this a 4. This palette ain't easy to work with at all. This is not the palette you want to use Monday morning when you done overslept. This ain't the palette you want to use Wednesday when you have a meeting to be at. This is the palette that you probably want to use Friday when you are going to be fashionably late. When I say fashionably late, I'm talking about 2 hours late, and you don't mind spending like 2 hours doing your makeup, and you have all the time in the world to build up an eyeshadow. That's when you use this palette. Yeah, I'm not trying to tear Morphe a new one. I love their products. As a artist and a consumer, I find that these products are a very good deal, because usually when you're talking about a palette that has 35 colors and more, you're gonna be in the hundreds. So I'm not expecting a perfect palette, because it's only like $24, $25. So for me to expect an eyeshadow palette that can help me walk on rainbows and skip through raindrops, I'm not gonna get that. You know, it'll be crazy for me to expect that. However, I do expect a little more, how can I say it, tact when releasing an eyeshadow palette. Usually Morphe will release a palette and they'll keep it around for a while. I'm hoping that they will do the same with this one, because yes, this has a lot of other colors, it has a lot of greens, it has some beautiful colors in the palette, but I feel that they probably may want to do another batch of this and work a little more on how these colors blend a little better. That will help keep the palette around for many, many years to come. As far as this being one of my favorite Morphe palettes, I would have to say this is my least of the favorite Morphe palettes. However, I'm not mad about it, because again, I didn't spend $60, $70, $80, $90, $100, but money is money and I don't have a lot of it. So I would have liked to seen a palette that swatched better, that blended a little better, that you can kind of tell the difference between the colors, because after a while they all start to look the same. And I would have liked to see a little more versatility with this palette, and also a better job with the separation of textures. I think it would have been really cool if they released this same palette in a shimmer and then the same palette in a matte. I think that would have been a little cool as well. So are you going to buy this palette, or do you own this palette? Hell, did you even know about this palette? Because it just seemed like they were like 35M Boss Boo next. So did you even know about this palette to even buy it? And if you have not joined this here family, boo sugar, what you waiting on? What is you waiting on, boo? I would love to have you here, because of all the places you could have been right here and right now, you're here with me, and I appreciate that. So if you feel that I deserve any like, subscription, or the hit of the notification bell, hit my bell, hit my bell, hit my bell, ring, ring, ding, hit my bell. I need to stop because if I go down low enough, I ain't coming back up. So, yes, join the family. Watch the other videos as well. I have a review, not a review, but a makeup tutorial I'm going to be putting up with this look. If you don't know what the love method is, or if you want to know more about it, go to my video on how to pick the perfect eyeshadow palette, and always come back for more. I release at least 2 videos per week. Usually those videos are going to be, mainly one is going to be a review, and the other is going to be like a tutorial or something like that. So be on the lookout for more videos, and once again, come over to this family. What is you waiting on? We got fried chicken and cookies over here. Yeah, do that. Go and hit the subscribe button. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna make sure. See my makeup, and I don't sweat it. It look bad. Yeah. Go and hit that button. Do that. Yeah, I said it. Love you. Bye. Oh Lord, I'm so tired. I'm getting too old.